All right, so we are going to finish our note today, and then we are going to use this as well. This is going to go over, like I said, how to turn on that correlation coefficient. So we just had time to do that. Okay, and you are going to have to know what the correlation coefficient is. We are always going to use our R squared. Okay, and then if you have this mode, I would use that. Not everybody has this in the mode, so this would be the second option that we talked about yesterday. All right, so yesterday we did the correlation coefficient. We entered our data into the list. If you guys cleared out your list, you may have to go back in and enter that data. So to look at the data, you're going to go to the stat key, press enter, make sure you have that same data in there. Okay, because we're going to do our scatter plot together today. So this is entering data into the list. Okay, and then we are going to graph the scatter plot today. Okay, so on your sheet, we already wrote some of this down. We're going to go over that again. Okay, if you did not write this down yesterday, this is going to be step 3, which is called the scatter plot. Okay, and then here it tells you you're going to use the y equals key. Okay, move the cursor to plot 1 above and hit enter. It'll be highlighted on. Okay, so the directions that I gave you yesterday was to hit the y equals key for plot 1. We're going to highlight that and press enter. And if you've done that correctly, when you go to y equals, okay, this should be cleared out and the plot, okay, should be on. Okay? All right. And then when you want to see that, this does say it here as well. You can go to the zoom key and then down to zoom stat, which is number 9. You can also just press number 9. Okay, so you can go to zoom. Okay, and then 9 is called zoom stat. Stands for zoom into the statistics. Okay, so that's why you can't clear out those lists. If you clear out the list, you are going to have it in there. All right, so we go to zoom, number 9, and then we can see our data points. Okay, so this is 0, 683. This is going to be 1, 652, 2, 948, so on and so forth. So those are your data points. Okay, if you don't have the same data points, just go ahead and double check that you do have the same list, that you have your numbers in correctly, and then it could just be that our windows are a little different, okay, but yours should look very similar to mine. All right. Now what we're going to do is we are going to graph the line of best fit in our scatter plot. All right, so the equation for that is here. Okay, so what we like to do is we like to see that line in our graphing calculator. So we are going to hit the stat button, and then we arrow over to calc, and then we go down to the linreg, which is number 4. Okay, you're going to keep pressing enter until it shows up with those values. Okay, but in this case, for the one that we are doing in particular, we decided that ours was court reg. So that's what we're going to do for this one. Okay, so this is called the line of best fit. Okay, so to graph the line of best fit, okay, you are going to go to Stat. You're going to arrow over to Calc. And then we are going to use Court Reg for this one because that's what we chose here. Okay, the one on your sheet is telling you LinReg because that's the first one, and you can look and see which one fits the best. We're going to decide to use this one. Okay, so we're going to store this regression equation. So to store the regression equation, we're going to use what is called vars for variables. So we're going to have to store the regression equation. We're just going to write down some quick notes and then we're going to do this together. Okay, and then when you go to vars, variables, we're going to go to the y variables, and then we're going to hit enter and enter. Okay, so go ahead and write that down. If you feel like you can follow those and you want to give it a try, you can do that. If you want to wait for me, I will walk you through it in just a moment. All right, and then you also do have some of these in here as well that we're going to talk about. So we're going to do the stat, arrow over to calc, and then you're going to go to court reg. Okay, so that's just like we did yesterday. Once you go to court reg, do you see where it says store the regression equation? It says store REGEQ. I want you to arrow down there. I'm just seeing if this one has that. Okay, so once you have that, maybe we should write this on here too, how to put in y equals. Okay, so that's where you have to select your regression. So it's either LinReg, quadreg, cubic reg. To put in y equals, do your regression. Okay, on the regression, you're going to go to the store regression equation. Okay, so to put this line in y equals, we're going to choose the regression that we decided, which in this case was court reg. Okay, to store this, this is where you're going to click those buttons that I just had you write down. Okay, this is vars. It's for variables. Okay, and vars is right here. Okay, so we're going to click that. Okay, so you should be here with me. Then we're going to arrow over to the y vars, which is the y variables. Okay, and then we want the function, so we're going to hit enter and then enter. Enter and then enter. So what you just told your calculator is to store that regression equation into y1. All right, and then you can go to calculate, okay? Now, when you click y equals, okay, you are going to see this. So you're just going to go to y equals, and then that's your regression equation. Okay, so it just took that long equation that we wrote down yesterday, this guy, okay, and it put it in your y equals for you. So now when you graph this, you can see how it fits the data. Okay, so when we're looking at the data, we want to see how close it is to 1. If it was 1, it would go through every single one of those points. Okay, and then you can see like it goes through this point, it's close to some others, and you could graph all of them to see which one was the line of best fit, but that correlation coefficient is going to do that for you. Okay, so after you do this, then you're going to go to y equals to see graph. Okay, and then we graphed it so we could see this. Okay, so when you graph it, you are just saying, hey, that looks like a good fit, or maybe it is not such a good fit. Okay, it depends on which one you are graphing. Now, this is going to help us with the last thing we have to do in the problem, okay, which from yesterday, it said to make a scatter plot and the curve of best fit to show the trend. So that's what we just did in step 3. It said to use the regression equation, which we found yesterday, to estimate the value on the first day of trading in 2000. So the fourth thing we're going to do is estimate in the year 2000. I'm just trying to go slow because I know this is a lot and I want to make sure you guys have enough time to write that part down. So the first thing you have to do is you have to go to stat, over to calc and the court reg, and then once you do that, you can store that equation by going to the vars, y vars, and then enter. Enter should put that y1 there, and if the y1 is there, that's where it's going to go. Okay, and then when we're estimating in this year 2000, let's keep in mind what our x value is. So x is the number of years since 1994. So in the year 2000, what is your value for x? 6. Okay, so there's a couple different things you can do. Because we've already stored the equation, okay, we can use the table because the equation is in y equals. So we have entered that equation in there. Okay, you can also like use that. So this says predicting a value. Okay, you can use the table, which is the quickest way. Once you have the regression equation in y equals, which is what I just showed you. Okay, so it says first copy the regression line. Okay, we just wrote that down on the first page. Okay, if you're like, Ms. Global, why are you making me write down all this stuff? Because you're going to forget. Okay, you remember right now, but you're going to have to do this several times, and I just want to be very clear where you can find the directions. Okay, so we just wrote those down on the first page. We also wrote them down here. Okay, and the simplest way to do it is to use the table. Okay, you can also use the graph. Okay, so if you're going to use the table, you're just going to go to second table. And if you're trying to find out what happens when y is 6, make sure that you highlight the y coordinate. Okay, you need to highlight the y-coordinate so that you can see that full value. Because in our table, I can just see 2561.2. Okay, they rounded that value. Whenever you're dealing with money, what place should you always round to? The nearest hundred, because it's the nearest cent, right? Unless it says round to the nearest dollar, okay, you are going to be rounding to the nearest cent. So in this case, your answer is going to be $2,561.17. Okay, this is the best answer, the most accurate answer. Okay, and so use the table, and we're going to highlight y value to see the full number. Okay, in the table it will round it, so we want to make sure that we can see that full number below. Okay. All right, and that was so much fun. We're going to do it again. And I promise it'll be quicker this time. Just explaining it, it does take a while. Okay, so in part B, it says the table shows the population of a city for 5 years. I want you to notice that in this table, okay, it gives you the years as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you do not need to do the value for X. You're only going to do like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if it is a year like 1990, okay, 2005, because then you're working with simpler numbers. All right, so in your table, the year is going to be your input. So this is going to be your list 1. Okay, this is going to be your list 2. All right, so if you don't remember what to do, let's go back and use this. So use the stat key, then the edit option. To clear values which are already in the list, highlight the list name. Press clear, do not press delete, don't do it. It will get rid of list 1 and then we have to do some things to get it back. All right, so I'm going to go to stat, I'm going to go to edit, I'm going to highlight L2, clear enter, all of them are gone. Clear enter, all of them are gone. All right, and then let's go ahead and enter these in. Okay, so step 1 is always going to be your list. So enter in your list. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1891, 2674, 3376, and then double check, because see, this was a double number. I was moving too fast, so just double check that before you go to the next step. 4480. Okay, and then again, it does say that we are using a graphing calculator to make a scatter plot and the curve of best fit to show that trend over time. Okay, then we are going to use an equation, that's the regression equation, to estimate the population the following year. And we are going to be rounding to the nearest thousandths. Okay, so once we do this, now we're going to find our regressions. Okay, so we're doing the linear regression, the quadratic regression, the cubic regression, and the chord regression. Okay, so for all of those, I want you to write out what your R squared value is. so I'm going to give you a moment to do that. So that's something that we did yesterday. If you need some help, I'll come around, or feel free to ask a neighbor. All right, so let's double check that we can find our values. Okay, so I'm going to go over the values with you. I know some of you are discovering some things and you're like, hey, why is this happening? Okay, we are definitely going to talk about that. I'm just going to talk about it with all of you. Okay, so for here, your R squared is 0.948. We are going to start by rounding these to the thousands place, but understand that sometimes they're really close together and you might have to go out further decimal places. Okay, and then the cubic regression, you should get exactly 1. So if you didn't get exactly 1, I just want you to double check your points in your table. Okay, it should be 1 exactly. Okay, and then when you do the court reg, you should also get 1. Okay, and it's 1 exactly. So I'm just going to remind you something that we talked about yesterday. So we're using this correlation coefficient to determine how close it fits the line. If two functions have the same R squared value, we said that we had to check to make sure that the A value was not 0. And then also check further decimal places if you can. Okay, the last two did not have any decimal places. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to check the A values. Okay, so maybe we should write down this reminder to check the A value when R squared are equal. Okay, and really that does happen a lot when they're both 1. So I still have my court reg pulled up. Okay, is my A value 0? Okay, so if your A value is 0, it will not be that one. Let's think about why. This is a quartic function. If my A value is 0, wouldn't that make this equation 0x to the 4th? Oh, man. Wouldn't that make it 0x to the 4th plus 80.5x cubed minus ... What is 0 times x to the 4th? 0. So then guess what? That goes away, and what type of function is it? It's a cubic function. So cubic is going to be our solution for this. Okay, so you can't have this, okay, which means it is going to be the cubic regression. Okay, and then let's go back to our cubic regression and see what that is. And maybe we will see some similarities here. Okay, so our regression equation is y equals 80.5 x to the third. Hey, wasn't that our value for the last time? X to the third. This would be the coefficient of x squared. They're giving you what the equation is, and you are filling in those coefficients. If you have nothing to round to, then that's fine. Okay, you see that this one is much nicer than yesterday's? I told you guys yesterday's was a beastly equation there. Okay, so then this is our regression equation. So this is what we're going to use to make predictions. And then when you are ready to check out that scatter plot and the line of best fit, you can do that on your graphing calculator. You do have to do that step because you're going to use it for the prediction, okay? So I am going to give you a moment to try it on your own, and then I will walk you through it if you're having some trouble. All right, so I'm going to just make sure you guys started. Okay, there is no work to be shown for this part. It's just going to lead you to the next one. So when you're doing the line of best fit and the scatter plot, you have to start with the cubic regression. Okay, so the cubic regression is stat, arrow over to calc, go to your cubic regression, and then we have to go to the store, the regression equation, and that's where you go to vars, y vars, enter, enter, calculate, and then it should put that into your y equals. Okay, and then go ahead and go to Zoom 9 to see that. I'll come around for that. So Zoom 9, and that's your stats. And don't worry, if you're having trouble, I will come and talk to you. Yes. So there must have been something in the table that is invalid dimension. When that happens, you start to start over. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's because you did the core thing and not the cubic, right? Okay, so for this one, you're doing the cubic regression because that's what we decided is our regression equation. And then once you've done that, okay, you can go to step 4. And in step 4, it says estimate the population the following year. So if you're doing the following year estimation, what are you going to look at in your table? What X value? In this case, it'll be, so if you ended with 5, the next year is going to be 6. Okay, so X is not always going to be 6. Might be 7. Oh, just kidding. Might be anything. But your value here is going to be 6. Okay, so do you guys think you can use the table to try that? Give me a thumbs up if you already done that part. Okay, now when you do your table, okay, and your scatter plot, you can just go to zoom, okay, and then zoom stat, and then look. Remember how I said if it's a 1, it should go through every point? That's why this one does that. Okay, it's not always going to be perfect like that, but this one is a perfect cubic function. Okay, so then I'm going to go to second table. I'm going to go down to 6, and then remember you are going to highlight that. Now, this is going to be something where you have to pay attention to the units. This is the population in thousands. Okay, so because the population is in thousands, you have 9826.000. This is in thousands, so you need to calculate that. To convert a decimal to thousands, all you have to do is multiply by 1,000, and that's going to be your final answer. Okay, so you're just going to take that value, 9826.000, multiply by 1,000. You can probably figure out what it is even without your calculator. Okay, so it's 9,826,000. Okay, and this is the population of a city, so this is going to be people. Okay, so you are going to include your units on there. Okay, if that went well for you, you are going to start your assignment. If you need help, I'm going to walk around and help you.